topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday, my favorite day of the week, because I get to be with you. So one of the fascinating stories that happened recently was that, I was leading a class and we had people from different generations. And what happened was, it was just fascinating to see how people opened up and they were complaining against each other. So younger generation was complaining about the older generation was complaining about the younger generation. And the key is that it's important to remember that societal events and as well as the technology does shape our thinking. So we were able to have them handshake, and it was just interesting with the solutions that they came up with. And the key is that knowing that how are you going to impact others? What is your intention? Because yes, we have got one life to live. And yes, we want to live a good life. It's also important to have that life that you is not only supporting yourself, it's not only about thriving yourself, but it's also about leaving that impact. And what better way to do that rather than using both of my books, because both of the books will position you to become an influencer in a meaningful way, not just the numbers and likes. It's about impacting other people's lives and the entrepreneur's garden, building that relationship with yourself and with others. And also remember that the partial profits from the book go to kiva.org, where we are helping entrepreneurs all across the globe. And remember to keep the kindness circle going, because an hour of your time every month can make a difference in many people's lives. It can be just a simple, cheerful good morning. And my friend were walking on this past Saturday, and this beautiful lady, we walk on a hike. We were hiking on a trail, and it's one of my favorite trails. And every time I've been on that trail around that time, she goes by wishing good morning to every person she comes across. And it just brings a cheer and a smile to people's faces. So remember, it doesn't have to be big or huge or a big gesture. So remember, a little kindness goes a long way. So let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Liah.
It is so great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now it's a pleasure to have you. So Liah, we usually start out in the childhood. Do you recall a moment or an event or a person that left a mark on you?
Oh, I had a couple of fantastic teachers that absolutely completely changed my life. And I would go back to those teachers later on. I remember being in my well, much later years, and I tried to find my fourth grade teacher, and I tracked her down. It was Sister Marie Bernadette, and I found her in a convent in retirement, and they told me, well, we don't know how she'll be on the phone. She's had brain surgery to remove a tumor, and she's now 86. And she said, of course I remember you. And how is your mother, Marianne? And how are your sisters? And I thought, there's
Whoa.
no way. So I was amazed that she remembered me, but my memory of her is what had changed my life. And what I felt from her was love. I think that the most important quality any teacher can exude is love. Love, 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 because that gives hope to these kids. They feel accepted. When you don't feel accepted, you are always in a state of defending yourself. And that is so uncomfortable. So yes, I remember those teachers well. That was just fabulous. And I had an unusual childhood, and I'm not, I don't want to extend this question, but I did not walk until I was 7. So I had a rather extraordinary, not compared to other kids who had deformities or disabilities, but I had 2 club feet and I had muscles twisted around my leg. And so I could not participate in games, and I did not interact with kids my age. My mother took me everywhere in the neighborhood in a little red wagon. And thankfully, that most amazing thing happened, that I was able to begin walking. And then I felt so far behind everyone else. I didn't know how to play kick the can or baseball or softball or any of the things the kids knew how to do, and didn't know how to talk to the kids. And it was another growth process. But these teachers were kind. And I think that's what all kids need.
Yeah. No, as you're talking, it definitely resonates with me, because I still remember to this day. We went through so many teachers, but the teachers that I remember, Sister Olivia, she was just an embodiment of kindness as you walked in the door. And I remember, it was during my kindergarten or first grade, I don't remember, when you are still like adjusting to the school and finding your way. And she would just embrace every little child and welcome them in. And we felt that we were surrounded in a cocoon of warmth and love. So I definitely get what you're saying. So if you're okay, I would like to kind of go back. You said that you couldn't walk, and that must have been so hard. So what changed that you could start walking?
Well, I don't even talk about that because I don't want it to sound woo-woo, but all I will say is I was at a big picnic with my family and other families from the National Guard of this unit. And I always had an invisible friend. And I think that would have been, my mother told me never to tell anyone about that. And just in short, in a 3-hour period of time, my invisible friend coaxed me to come out from under the picnic table where I generally sat. And I crawled out and crawled over to see where kids were running a foot race. It probably was less than 3 hours, maybe about an hour and a half. But an hour and a half later, I ran a foot race, and not only ran it, I won it. And my mother was speechless. My father was speechless. It was showing me the power of all that we cannot see. And I call that quantum intelligence. I learned that at a very, very young age. I learned the incredible power. And just it was 3 days later, that was on a Saturday. So on a Monday, Tuesday, my mother took me to the same store where they had drawn my foot 3 weeks earlier. Every year before the school year started, they would draw my foot on a piece of brown paper, and my foot was generally looking more like a marshmallow than a foot. And they drew the new feet and cut them out with scissors and laid the new feet on top of the old feet. And I remember stepping back from this ottoman where all these four adults were staring down at what they were looking at, and nobody said a word. And I'm thinking, I can't tell them about my friend. I can't tell them how he told me what to do. And so I didn't. And I believe that was given to me to shape my entire life. And I haven't used it to perfect advantage my whole life, because the emotions cause us to forget what we know, and or to not use what we know, which is another factor. But it was the most important training I could have had. And coupling that with the fact that my family was, we had very little money. My father worked 3 jobs, and everybody thought he had money because he had a high position in our community, but he was making less than a school teacher. And we knew exactly what he was making, because that was shared in family conferences. And we were basically told not to grow too fast because we couldn't afford new clothes. So it was, being born into that made me learn how to create with my mind. And I felt very bad about asking for anything that I didn't absolutely have to need, that I didn't need it for survival. And I remember this, we're coming upon the Lent season, and I'm hoping that this will be seen year round, but I've had miracles occur then. And it sounds like you have a similar background. At Lent, you give up something. And we didn't have desserts to give up. All my friends were giving up desserts. And I thought, you have dessert? And so it was something else. And I got the message telling me, go to church after school for 20 to 30 minutes every single day. And that's what I did. And I learned during that time, and was guided during that time, how to use my mind to create what I wanted. But first, I had to get over having a sense of guilt for asking for something that was extraneous to mere survival, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I think it's not just me, it's so many women do not ask for what they are valued. They don't value themselves enough to ask for what they are worth. And so I'm convinced this first step of being able to ask, to form in your mind the goal you'd like to see happen, please do that first and make sure that you're not feeling guilty about it.
Absolutely. And what a journey. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being open to sharing that moment from your life. And as you said, that you crawled out from underneath the table, and how powerful that can be. And I have heard stories after stories of miracles. And I can guarantee each and every one of us have their own miracles, because so many times we forget what we have achieved, and if we reflect upon our lives, you think, was that me who did that? And we forget that we do have the support, whatever we want to call, the inner resource, nature, God, whatever speaks to you. It's important to do that. So as you continued growing up, where did your interest take you?
Well, I knew I wanted to be a writer from the time I was 9 years old. And I also was living in a part of the world up near Canada, in northern Minnesota, where I didn't see anybody making a living as a writer. I didn't know any. I just knew I needed to be a writer, but I thought I needed to do something to earn money. And so I got a law degree. And I thought, well, I think people make money at this. I've seen them. These men wear suits. And so that's what I think I'll do. But I had an interest in so many things. My dad was a judge and a Marine and a National Guard Army lieutenant colonel eventually. And he had no sons. And so the lucky thing for me is I was one of 4 daughters. And after I was able to be more mobile, my dad included me in what he would say to my other sisters. Hey, go pick up the sticks before I mow. Hey, we're going to get on the roof today and do some shingles. Oh, okay, Dad. And so I learned to do all kinds of things. I loved watching my dad build our house. And I was just very young at the time. I was 7 years old, but it was just a miracle. Then my dad continued on and he built a sailboat in our garage. and,
Oh,
and
wow.
learning to see people make something out of nothing. That's what I benefited from so much. And that's what I wanted to do, make something out of nothing. The other thing I absolutely loved was languages. And even when I was 9 years old, I was convinced that I was French. And I also was convinced that I was American Indian. And my mother had to correct me several times, but I said, no, I am. And I know that I'm Cherokee. And that's so.
You don't know what was speaking to you or if it was an imagination. Sometimes it's important to allow children to just be. And there's so
Oh,
many different phases that they grow out of it.
oh,
So,
yes.
yeah.
My 17-year-old daughter, we celebrated her 10th year anniversary of her arriving in our home. And I came across some pictures of her sitting out on the deck. She was preparing herself to become a mermaid. She was 7. She was shaking salt on her legs. Oh, yes, we grow out of a lot of phases. She wanted to be a mermaid so badly, and I understand that.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, I can definitely see you learning what different things, like, as your dad was teaching, and I got to share
Yeah.
that. I didn't have that. My dad was not very handy. So first of all, thank you to your dad for his
Yes.
services to our country. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
yeah. And as you're talking about it, when parents pass on those skill sets, they're so critical. So my dad passed on different skill sets to me. And I see, like, in our neighborhood, we have a family with 2 girls and a boy. And the father is teaching them all the skill sets. And recently, when I met one of the girls, and she said, oh, yeah, you know what? I did this with my house and this project and changed to this in my car and all that. And it's so amazing to see that regardless whether you're a girl or a boy or a man or a woman, if you know how to fix things, it makes life so much easier. So I know you mentioned about, like, building houses. So tell us about, how did you get into that?
Well, I was in a bad situation. I was divorced and I had no money. And I thought that I had landed in an incredible thing. I was living outside of Atlanta and I bought a house where I could assume the mortgage, which meant here I was, single woman. I could get this mortgage and just keep paying on it. And I thought, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Well,
Hmm.
7 years later, I knew what I saw and thought I understood, but I really didn't understand that this mortgage had an interest rate that went up and up and up and up and up.
Mhm.
And the principal balance on it did not go down. It went up and up and up. I was ready to sell my house. And then I realized that if I did, I had to pay somebody money to get out of it because I wasn't going to make any at all. And so it was just a terribly bad mortgage. Plus, by the time I had, at 7 years into it, I was paying 18.75%. 18.75% on
Oh,
this tiny house. And it wasn't that I wasn't grateful. I was absolutely grateful. But I also realized that if I sold it, I needed to move somewhere. I needed to have something. And I did not have, I had nothing in the bank except for $4,000 after having sold a small motorhome I owned, a little tiny motorhome that took me around the US and Canada speaking at churches. And so I had been doing that for a long time. And I just decided it's time to sell this and then see what I can do with it. So I took my $4,000 and In the months prior to that, I had been guided to a place where I started looking for a piece of land on a lake. And lucky me, I found this piece of land. It really was the most extraordinary thing. I only had to pay $149 a month to have a piece of land at the edge of a lake.
Wow.
And I said, I've got to do something. I'm fine with living in this tent. And what I did to continue writing my books was I would go into town and charge up my computer at a restaurant and then come back and write until I ran out of juice. And then I'd go back and do it again. And it was a about an hour-long round trip to do that. So I said, this is time. I'm going to build a house. And I had been sketching houses since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I loved it. I loved to design houses. So I decided to design a lean-to made of wood, basically. Something with a shed roof where it's just this slope, easy thing. Put it together and I could move into something other than my tent, because the tent was okay, but it needed something more. I look back on this and think, how did I even find these guys? I found 2 carpenters to work with me, and I convinced a friend of mine to help. And the 4 of us went out to the property, and the trees had already been cleared about a year before that. It took me 2 years to get started on this after I bought the property. But on a September morning, the 4 of us went out there and started digging holes to put up this post and beam house, meaning you take those posts and bury them into the ground in concrete. And that creates a very solid, storm-hardy house. And
so just kind of curious, like, do you have to pour the foundation first?
No.
Oh.
And this is the foundation. These posts, some of them are cut off when they're underneath the floor, and some of them go all the way up the exterior wall. So if a storm comes and the house should be pushed by extreme winds, the house moves, but it doesn't shove it off of its foundation.
Interesting.
It can't lift it up. There is nothing it can do. You just have to make sure the roof is on securely with what we need to put on with the metal fasteners we use now to have it be tornado proof, but nothing is proof anything. We just have to get hardy. There's hardiness is what we're looking for. But here's the amazing thing. This process of building was so fast that we put the walls on, and in the middle of the whole thing, we were going to cut off some of these tall posts. And I said, wait a minute. If we leave them, we go up higher and I can have a second floor. I could put a sleeping loft up there. We were able to get it high enough that not only that, but I got a bedroom and another bathroom out of it. We continued to do the framing with the wood I already had, that I had figured out how much I needed, and I ordered it. We put the roof on it on the 4th day, and on the 4th night, I slept in the house because it was dried in. 4.5 days is what it took us. 4.5 days. And I had a structure to move my sleeping bag and my dog into. And it was extraordinary. And then I put plastic over all the window openings. And then in short order, after going to surplus stores, had got my windows. I put all the windows in. I had one person helping me. I then taught myself how to do electrical wiring, because my dad, who was up in Minnesota and I was in Georgia, my dad said, just get 3 books from Home Depot or Lowe's and you're going to be able to figure it out. And I said, what about the big panel? He said, hire somebody for that, but you can do all the rest. And I did. And then I had a plumber come in and give me an estimate. And he said, well, that'll be $4,500. And I thought, I don't have that money. So I went out and bought another 3 books. So that took me a little longer to get ready. But all told, after putting in the electrical wiring, hiring somebody to do the panel, putting in the plumbing myself, then putting in the insulation, and I hired a man to come in and do the sheetrock, I had a house. I painted it. I finished it. I had a gorgeous 2-story, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. And when I went back and looked at how much time it had actually taken me to work on that house in between going out and speaking, which is what I did all the time, seminars and keynotes and all different kinds of things. I found out I'd only been working at it 25 days. So what I am saying, what I've decided to do is teach people, and especially women, teach people. And a group I'm focusing on also is women veterans, especially women veterans who have children, because
that's amazing.
they're
You're
having
an
a tough
inspiration,
time.
Leah. That is so tell us, like, if there's a veteran or even if there's another woman, how can they go about, because you mentioned that people can build their houses like around 44,000, something like that. So tell us, like, in short, a quick process.
Well, a place to go? Is that what you're asking?
No, like, how would they build a house in around like $44,000?
Well, part of it is I train people to do that. I have an online course, and you can just do the quick course and see if this is for you or not. And then if you say I want to do this, you can become part of a group coaching at a distance. And if you really are ready, you come here where I'm building, and you're part of a workshop that lasts for 4 days, and we show you hands-on how to do this. So that is the best way. Learn from someone. Don't do what I did. It took me so much time in between to teach myself. But if that's all you can do, do that. Do whatever you have at your disposal. Just take advantage of your mobility and your determination. Do it. Because when you have a house that you have paid less than $50,000 for, you will find out that it appraises for at least 3 times what you have in it. And suddenly your net worth has mushroomed. And if you want to borrow against that, you can. But what I would highly advocate is that people start building their wealth that way. Stay in that house for 2 years, sell it, and move on, because the tax laws say when you sell a house and you make less than $250,000, you get to keep it all with no tax. So if somebody had told me about this, I wish they had, I would have moved every 2 years and continued to increase my wealth until I finally reached a point where I said, I'm going to stay here. I love this. I don't want to leave. But get started, get a foothold, start somewhere.
That is excellent. And you did talk about, building your own house. So definitely you want to get a piece of land. So what's a good way of going about that?
It's one of my favorite things. There's land all over the United States that's available for a very low cost. Some of them are not in the most perfect of areas, but what I would say to look for, and you can find this in a reasonable way, a community that has a community well, first of all, so that water is already piped past your lot. So all you have to do is tap into that. And so at the same time, they have electricity there. All you have to do is tap into the electricity. When you are finding a piece of land that is very cost effective, you're going to be a little farther away from the town or the city, but not exorbitantly. What's the difference between driving an hour in North Atlanta traffic to get into Atlanta, as opposed to driving from somewhere that's at the edge of Atlanta and driving into the edge of Atlanta for an hour? What's the difference? Nothing. And it's more pleasurable because you're not in tight traffic. But it's not just Georgia. It's all over the United States. There are pieces of property, even in California, even in New York, everywhere, where you can get a piece of property for anywhere from, and I say this carefully, but anywhere from 15,000 to 25 or 30,000, which is a reasonable amount. Then the only thing you're going to have to add to that is a septic tank. And the key is you must have the soil tested. I just met with a soil scientist yesterday and found out my new lot is perfect, is beautiful, it's wonderful. The lot has to percolate. It has to be able to let the water filter down fast enough so that it's not resting near the top of the soil. It goes down below, it runs through channels, and it's purified through the water, through the land. And it has to qualify for this. So you have to check the land out before you agree to buy it or after you have it under contract. But sometimes land can be purchased by owner financing or some other kind of financing. And that makes it so much easier to acquire that piece of property. I mean, just like I acquired the land that I bought first for $149 a month. I pushed myself to do that, but I afforded that. I could do that. So I'm just telling you, there are people that make it their business to find land that other people bought a long time ago and then decided not to build on. But I would recommend not to buy in an area where the electricity isn't in there yet. It's just too much of a challenge. Don't do that the first time around. Get electricity and water first. And then you decide where the driveway goes in and you're good to go.
Oh, I did. I can definitely say that. I'm speechless because, all these things, like, simple things to think about. And I definitely see the value they would get working with you. And as you mentioned that, you can keep on building that wealth. So now let's say if people just kind of buy a piece of land and don't want to build a house.
Yeah.
How do they, is that worth it?
Well, you have to choose so wisely. Does it have a view? Is it on water? Does it have anything that sets it apart from other kinds of properties? Because otherwise you are at the mercy of the surrounding area. If you buy in an area that is not rising in value, you're very much at risk. So just choosing a piece of property to wait until that raises value is not really an ideal thing to do, because you have to be so very, very, very good at choosing property. And usually that takes years to figure out. But some people may have had a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle who was good at this, or a grandparent who said, this is how you choose. So I'm not saying that you're foreclosed from doing that. I do have a friend who bought some mountain property up in North Carolina, and she turned around, she bought it for something like $6,000, and she sold it probably 3 years later for $26,000. I mean, even then, that's a great boost. I mean, as my father would say, $20,000 is better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Your father sounds like a wonderful person. So now you have mentioned that, building about wealth. So there may be entrepreneurs who are thinking, I am handy. I can go and learn with Liah. So if they're thinking and now, they want to build the houses, move on, and maybe they want to be known for it in the market. So you do talk about visibility. To tell us a little bit about how can these entrepreneurs or other entrepreneurs create visibility for themselves?
Oh, and that's another topic. That's another big topic. Because one of the things I do when I'm working with entrepreneurs is to help them find their voice. And first of all, before anything else, to give themselves permission. Now, I would say that 1 out of 40 entrepreneurs I work with has no problem with stepping forward and saying, this is who I am. This is what I have to offer. It's wonderful. It's great. You should do this. Most of us have to convince ourselves to step forward because we want the product or the service to speak for itself. We say, well, you should know this is what, I'm an attorney. You're going to get a will. That should stand for itself. No, I'm sorry. People buy from people they feel they know and trust. And they've got to see you. So today, every entrepreneur has to be able to step forward and express. So I teach people how to become better speakers, but underneath the mechanics of that is every bit of what is the most important thing that we are living on, which is our self-image, our self-value, our self-permission. All the voices, or the voice that's in our head telling us to stop or not do something we want to do. We have to overcome a lot of things to get to the point where we allow ourselves to get on a YouTube video, or to get on a Facebook ad, or to go out and say, I'd like to speak to your group about what I do. You could be a professional, you could be an author, you could be an artist, you could be an entrepreneur of a brick and mortar store, but still people need to know who you are. And today, this is like the corner market. Being online is the most and best and greatest opportunity anybody could ever have. All you need to do is get comfortable enough with yourself. But it's not just a matter of speaking what you need to speak. It's a matter of holding the vision in your mind of what would be wonderful, what would be fabulous. You got to find something that you love, that you're in love with. And here you would say, here is the outcome I would like to have. Wow, this is the outcome I would like to have. And you hold that firmly in your mind as you do everything, because you know what? Over the internet, all of us can feel desperation. All of us can feel anger. All of us can feel a sense of irritation. So we better not be feeling those things. We better be feeling a sense of joy and love and all the good things we want, because people can see it and feel it. And, you know, Divya, something else I really didn't say is my mom died when I was in my 20s. And my
Oh, I'm
mom,
so sorry to hear that.
I didn't know what a child I was in my 20s
Well,
because,
usually most young men and women, they're like either man child or a girl, woman child. They're trying to find their identities and yet have not grown fully because they're testing the waters, adulting as we
yeah.
speak now.
Oh,
Sorry
absolutely.
to hear that.
I was on my own. I went to
Mhm.
college and I applied to colleges without my parents even knowing that I was applying to colleges. I didn't want them to have any financial burden or have any concern about it. I protected them from that whole process. So I was grown. I was mature. I knew what I was doing. I had traveled. I was writing. I was doing a lot of things and going to graduate school before she even passed away. But when she passed away, I realized that I was still having long episodes of depression. I was the kind of person, and had been since I was 13 years old, that I would get hit with these uncontrollable bouts of feeling paralyzed, immobilized, and I could not function. And after she passed away, I just looked in the mirror and said, Liah, if you don't figure out how to be happy now, you may not have all the years you think you're going to have to learn how. You better start getting it right this minute. The biggest change of my life happened when I finally got a grip on my own brain, on my own thoughts, on my own focus, and was able to direct myself toward what I wanted instead of toward what was bringing me down. And everybody needs to start there. Every pathway begins with getting yourself into a great foundation, the firmest foundation ever, a mindset that is storm hardy, because life is going to hit you. It doesn't matter you're going to have a flat tire. It's just life. Things happen and nobody's out to get you. It's just that we have to learn resilience, bouncing back, quickly coming back, being able to talk to ourselves like the best parent in the world or the best coach in the world, and talking to ourselves like, hey, is that helpful? If you talk like that, is that helping you get your energy back? Really?
Yeah, no, you're definitely spot on in that life is so short that if we may think that, oh, life is big, but the eternal truth is that we all gotta go sometime.
Yeah, we all gotta go sometime.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But because of that, keeping inside, because my dad just passed away and
I'm
I
so
thought I was
sorry.
ready for it.
Oh,
Thank
no.
you. I thought I was ready for it, but I wasn't. And it's his legacy and his his spirit of enjoying life is what shows up in every little itty bitty thing in my life. So as you're mentioning that, it's, if now is not the time, then when to bring that joy into your life.
Right.
So as we kind of bring our show to a close, where can people find you and where can people reach you?
Well, one of the places it's a program that I developed for getting yourself out of a rut and reminding yourself. It's at happytuneup.com. Happy tune-up. Everybody knows how to be happy when everything's going great. But happytuneup.com will take you to a description of a program I've put together that's like having a happiness tutor for 30 straight days. And then you can do it again and again and again and again if you want. But it is a wonderful, people have told me they thought they knew everything, and this has really helped them. If other people are interested in looking at the building for a house, I have a YouTube channel that has just started. It's called Home, and then the number 4, Home for the Heart. Home for the Heart on the YouTube channel. And it has a video of the first house I ever built. It is so beautiful. I want you to see it because it doesn't look like affordable housing. And then finally, this is a little longer one. If you want to look at some of the things I've created to help people, even about how to get yourself to attract more wealth, it's at learn.lifecraft.com. Learn.lifecraft.com. And you can see what I've been up to, as I want to share all of this before I leave the plane. And I have managed to, the great thing about having stubbed my toe in so many ways and had held myself up in so many ways is that I've learned. And if I hadn't had all those blockades, I wouldn't have learned. And so then, because I've learned, I want to share it. Because I can see so clearly now why I had such difficulties early on making money and opening the way. I know what it takes now, and I still work on myself. But thank you, God, that I don't have to work on myself every minute of every day. It is more like roller skates, and then sometimes hit a door, but but it's easier and easier and easier.
That's beautiful. And as you were mentioning, I was thinking there's opportunity in every obstacle to be found and taken, not only just to discover it, but take it by the horns and go turn things around. So Thank you, Liah, for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you. Beyond Confidence. Yes, I love the title of your podcast. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. You are the lifeblood of our show. So reach out to us. Let us know how we can support you, how we can bring you experts that make your life better and help you live the life you want and deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.